Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre, Glynn,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors, and you're welcome to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, bringing you the latest information, science and opinion to improve farm sustainability.
With the Christmas season very much in swing now and lots of houses displaying wonderfully lit up trees and decorations, sometimes we take for granted how much we rely on our electricity supply or how it's produced.
Teagasc Energy and Rural Development Specialist Barry Caslin joins us to discuss the possibility of energy shortages in the future, price hikes, and what the agricultural industry can do to help solve the problem.
The way we produce and use energy is going to change dramatically, Cathal, over the next 10 years. EirGrid is the company which manages our electrical distribution grid, and it is committed to providing 70% of Ireland's electricity from renewable sources by 2030. But at the moment, we're just generating about 36% of our electricity from renewables, and that's mainly coming from wind. So that's really the reason for the push to incentivize the switching away from fossil fuels. When I talk about fossil fuels, I'm talking about coal and gas, and 50% of our electricity is actually produced at the moment from the fossil fuel gas. We phased out oil back in 2011, so none of our electricity is produced from oil since then. So the coal power stations have been decommissioned at Money Point, but there is potential that they could be used again because there are potential issues with electricity shortages. There's projected shortages because there's going to be a massive change in terms of our this transition to renewables, and there will potentially be shortages at certain times. Like the wind doesn't produce electricity if the wind isn't blowing. The solar PV won't be generating electricity at night time. So this is where, we have been warned about blackouts and shortages and higher bills, as the UK are already facing. And, some of the companies as well, you've probably seen the likes of, Electric Ireland and Bright Energy. Like you've seen, a lot of price hikes. Like since the start of energy costs are expected to rise by around €500 for the average household this year. And there's been something like 30 price hike announcements from the different energy providers this year alone. And I think the most significant increase this year, you can see it in the transport sector, where costs have gone up about over 11%. And this is mainly caused by higher prices for diesel, for petrol, for cars, and also in the higher cost of servicing personal transport as well. So as much as 80% of the country's energy needs will have to be produced from renewables by 2030. And we will be heating our homes in the future as well, using heat pumps. Those heat pumps will use compressors which require electricity. So essentially we'll be heating a lot more of our homes from electricity as well. And that's going to put an increased demand on the electricity grid and the sources of electricity that we'll be using in the future. And Irish data centres will be accounting for around 15% of the country's total electricity consumption this year in 2021. And I think the medium range projection is that data centres will be consuming about 24% of all of Ireland's electricity availability by 2030. That'll be enough to power over 1 million homes in the country. So the electricity usage will represent around 31% of all the power available on the grid at any time from the data centres. So I think the way we produce the electricity from renewables going forward is going to be very, very important. I think agriculture will play a major role in doing that. But certainly, I think that there are going to be a lot of jitters over the next 5 years in this transition from fossil fuel produced electricity to renewable forms of electricity.
It's funny because I hadn't really heard much until the media broke there recently that we're going to be a bit of a crisis over the next 5 years. And I don't know, are they dramatising it, or is it the way it's going to be that we could have blackouts at certain times? I presume that's not the case, but if energy is going to be a shortage, and you touched on it there with price rises, if it's down to supply and demand and the energy is not there, the prices are surely going to go up and up, and until we come up with the technologies to look after that.
Yeah, and this is where we're going to be looking at the type of technologies that will be, we could be looking at technologies like biogas or anaerobic digestion from a renewable generation perspective. Like if we're talking about 80%, the figures is anywhere between 70% of our electricity to be coming from renewables by 2030. That's going to create a massive transition. Now, if you think of some of these renewable technologies like wind turbines that aren't generating electricity continuously, and solar PV, where a lot of the chips are being laid at the moment, again, won't be generating electricity continuously. But there are other technologies such as biogas, anaerobic digestion, where you could be continuously producing electricity all year round, no intermittency at all. So the technologies do exist, but I suppose what we have to look at from an Irish perspective is what's the best options for us going forward.
That in mind then, Barry, what opportunities are available to the farming sector in terms of renewable energy generation?
Yeah, I suppose most farms don't use a lot of electricity during the daytime every day. The exceptions would be the intensive units like pigs, poultry, horticulture. Be a lot of electricity usage, a lot of heat usage on those farms. The problems for dairy farmers is that batteries are still too expensive to slot into the mix and to store that power for the period that they are actually going to need it. But even when battery storage or batteries themselves become more affordable and to be plugged into dairy units all over the country, there's going to be a whole swathe of the farming community in the beef, and the sheep and the tillage sectors where they have minimal power requirements and they won't be able to utilize solar power at any scale. So like large shed roof space is perfect and they're ideal locations for solar panels, and they turn otherwise redundant space into power generation, and they're out of the eye line of the general public. And power generation companies could potentially be signing up farmers to rent the roof space, and everyone gets a slice of the pie. So microgeneration and the ability to sell to the grid may be an opportunity for farmers fairly soon, and hopefully we will have an announcement on that fairly soon on the possibilities there. But in terms of, I suppose there are opportunities for farmers to set up agricultural supply chains in terms of biomass, setting up biomass trade centres, whether that's forestry, pulpwood, selling biomass into boilers, into places that have large heat or hot water demand. So the opportunities to sell renewable heat, and the type of agricultural feedstocks that could be used there would be pulpwood from forestry or straw. We produce over 1 million tonnes of straw in Ireland every year. Purpose-grown energy crops, it could be grass for silage, biogas or anaerobic digestion. So there'll be a lot of different opportunities there for farmers to get involved. So I suppose it's really about, and I always say the first fuel on every farm is looking at energy efficiency, cutting down the kilowatt hours that need to be used to run various pieces of equipment, or whether that's putting in a variable speed drive in a milking parlour, to cut the kilowatt hours of electricity used during the milking process. All of these things need to be looked at first before you start deploying renewable technologies such as solar PV or biogas. You need to become energy efficient, and that would be dairy farmers, maybe monitoring their energy use, benchmarking it. I'd love to see more examples of dairy farmers benchmarking in discussion groups together, comparing what they're spending on electricity usage on their farm on a monthly, yearly basis. Optimizing the milk cooling systems, basic improvements in water heating, lighting system improvements, looking at LED lights and lights of variable speed drives. And on pig units as well, there's great opportunities as well. Maybe putting in building energy management systems, regularly servicing the boilers, insulation for air tightness, looking at things like circulation fans, fitting maybe automatically controlled natural ventilation systems. And again, on poultry farms, very, very similar to that, again, lighting, insulation, building energy management systems are very, very important there as well. But then the main opportunities for farmers to, after that, deploying these technologies will be, many farmers are being asked by development companies at the moment to host solar PV on their lands, host wind turbines on their lands, to feed into, to sign exclusivity agreements and long-term option agreements with these developers. And that's an opportunity for farmers to rent out or lease their land for long periods of time and get a guaranteed income over maybe 20 to 30 years. So these are I suppose, the opportunities that are emerging there at the moment, which I suppose is great from the perspective of diversifying the income stream for the farmer. It's creating land use alternatives. And God knows we know that our beef farmers are looking for, while prices might be good at the moment, but beef has been bad for the last decade, and many of those beef farmers are looking for land use alternatives, and I suppose energy supply and also utilising energy on your own farm are opportunities going forward.
You mentioned anaerobic digestion there, Barry, a second ago. Can you tell us what it is really? I suppose every meeting I go to, I'd say once every few months, farmers are coming up to me asking me about it. What is it, number one, but is it a potential, I suppose, enterprise on a farm?
Yeah, AD or biogas is it's a type of energy generation, and it's been around for many years. I mean, it's used in loads of in India and China for even at really small scale for even cooking food on, and run their ovens on it on cow dung. But the opportunities, I suppose, for AD is we're talking here about larger scale projects. You know, you're talking about maybe 500 kilowatt type projects like what you see in Germany, in Denmark, in Austria, and in many countries across Europe. And AD is essentially where you're using feedstocks, carbon-based feedstocks, such as it could be grass silage, it could be animal manures, it could be the organic fraction of municipal solid waste, it could be food waste, you know, it could be sewage sludge, seaweed. All of these materials can be fed into a digester. There's a retention period of maybe 30 or 40 days. They operate at a temperature of around maybe 40, 45 degrees Celsius. And during that retention period, the material is broken down, the organic fraction is broken down, and it produces, through the methanogen bacteria, it produces a gas called a biogas. That gas contains about 60% carbon dioxide. It contains 6% methane, about 40%, 35% carbon dioxide, and the rest is made up of trace gases like hydrogen sulfide, water vapor. And that biogas can be run through an engine to produce electricity, and the byproduct is heat. So it's CHP, or combined heat and power. But there's also the opportunity in that process to upgrade that biogas to biomethane to clean up the gas. So you're taking out essentially you're taking out the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen sulfide, cleaning up that gas to over 97% methane, and that's called biomethane. And that methane could be, or biomethane could be injected into the national gas grid to produce renewable heat feedstock and displace the natural gas, which is a fossil fuel essentially in our gas networks. And that's something that Gas Networks Ireland are looking at the moment under like Project Clover, is to displace that natural gas, because all gas networks all over Europe are under pressure to decarbonize their gas networks and replace the fossil fuel gas with a renewable gas. So farmers will have a major role to play in doing that. But it's going to require policy mechanisms to make it all happen. And you know, there will be opportunities for jobs to be created in the process. There will be a lot of investment required. You know, you're talking about billions of euros that will have to be invested to get this industry off the ground. But it will improve our energy security. It will reduce our energy import bill if we do get more AD operating on the ground. And AD is a technology which can tick, like when we look at energy use in Ireland, it's for transport, it's for heat, and it's electricity. And AD can be used for all three of those. So many of these technologies can only be used for maybe electricity only, and not heat and not transport. But you can, that upgraded biogas, because it's the same as propane or natural gas, that could be used in bus fleets, in captive fleets. It could be used for heavy goods vehicles. You know, so there will be new opportunities emerging on the horizon, the likes of biomethane in transport, like hydrogen in transport, that will offer opportunities for farmers to be supplying feedstocks such as grass silage into these digesters to keep them fed all year round, because that's one of the biggest challenges in the due diligence of any of these AD biogas projects is to secure the feedstock to keep these digesters fed all year round.
What is Teagasc doing to lead and promote alternative and renewable energy sources?
Yeah, I suppose, or what am I doing?
What are you doing, Barry?
Yeah, I suppose we run a lot of events around these whole areas on various topics, and we would, I suppose one of the biggest events that we run every year is in Gurteen College, and it's called Energy and Agriculture. So it's one every year in the month of August. We've done it together with Teagasc and Gurteen Agricultural College and Tipperary Energy Agency, Tipperary County Council. And it's worked out to be a great event, disseminating information about the options for farmers, for the various types of farmers that can use these renewable technologies, become more energy efficient. We've developed a series of fact sheets. There's over 20 fact sheets on energy and stuff like connecting to the grid, energy crops, the areas of biogas. So it gives farmers an introduction to these areas. So we would run some seminars from time to time, or have run seminars when we were allowed to run face-to-face seminars on things like biogas or heat pumps and these technologies and their relevance to agriculture. And we've set up a training program for advisors now to train up our advisors on energy use. So that's something that we'll be delivering with Sligo Institute of Technology through a European project called AgroRes. We'll be training advisors both within Teagasc and private advisors as well on I suppose dealing with those questions that farmers may have on their farm, because most advisors are very competent in their own areas, whether that's on breeding or technical advice on on farm agricultural advice. But when it comes to the area of energy, maybe advisors are out of their comfort zone, maybe talk about suitable lighting or suitable heating systems or cooling systems. So that's why we want to provide this training for the advisors also.
That's great, Barry. Well, look, I suppose hopefully the amount of Christmas lights we put up this year won't be going black out over Christmas, but just like to thank you and wish you and your family a very happy Christmas.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you very much, guys. Same to yourselves.
That's it for this episode of the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast. Thanks to Barry Caslin, Teagasc Energy and Rural Development Specialist, for joining us on the show.
Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. And you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glynn.
We'd like to wish you and your family a very, very happy Christmas and a happy New Year.